In this video, we will talk about kinship and gender. These two can be said as significant pillars in sociology, and at the same time their study holds very important position in anthropology also. The reason is this, that society comprised of individual and there is a system of relationships, interdependentness, interactionism is there, and wherever these are existing, definitely the process of sociological understanding and anthropological understanding exist. So, when we talk about the concept of marriage, family, the concept of kinship is again closely associated to it. And when we talk about the term or the concept of gender, these three are already having the role of male and female in it. Therefore, kinship and gender hold significant position in the life of people, and at the same time it can be said they hold significant position in sociology and anthropology. No doubt in the study of anthropology from very long time, study areas, thrust areas were very clear, and it was believed that very few female were working in that area. No doubt the answer or the claim is having certain significance in the sense that the number of female working in it, like Ruth Benedict, Margaret Mead, they were working, but their area of working was not that much expanded, which was the area which was held by male. Therefore, in the anthropological studies, it was questioned that whether female are working in the area or not, which was the center of investigation. And similarly, in the kinship studies, that was a existing question. Now, the study of gender and kinship basically did away with the notion that kinship is simply biology, but brought into focus the fact that it is more a human creation factored by culture. Both kinship and gender theories are built upon natural differences between men and women. Kinship and gender studies are basically concerned with understanding and cross-culturally comparing the rights and duties that constitute relationships between people who differ from each other. Kinship is not only biological but also have socio-cultural base. This is the underlining feature to keep in mind, because kinship is a system of social organization based on real and putative family ties. In sociology, kinship involves more than family ties, and in our day-to-day life we are having very close association with the socio-cultural basis of kinship. Therefore, kinship studies is very important by various scholars from time to time immemorial. From Morgan to Schneider, Durkheim to Levi-Strauss, W.H.R. Rivers to Malinowski, and Radcliffe Brown to Fortis, all had taken up the study of kinship relationships. Works of this era reflected the ongoing phase of trying to build up the web of relations through blood ties, that is biological, and affinal, that is cultural relationships. A basic question can be asked at this juncture, that why kinship is important in small scale societies. The answer lies in the fact that the biological relationship in the form of parents, children and grandparents provide the basic category through which social relations can be organized. One should not get the impression that kinship is paramount only in simple societies, because most of the complex societies also lay emphasis on kinship bonds over and above other kinds of achievements. However, apart from kinship, there may be some other social categories of caste, class, etc., that may be evoked besides kinship for various consideration. Actually, kinship provides a point of reference for various behavioral patterns, rights and obligations between people. It is in this context that kinship studies are of great importance to anthropologists, as it gives them the necessary analytical reference point through which various social behaviors can be studied. It is not that anthropologists do not recognize the biological relationship between the kins, but it is the social dimension of kinship in which they are most interested. These social relationships can be different types involving a notion of authority, subordination, hierarchy and obligation. Thus, gender is now associated and can be defined as associated to kinship, because the relationship of kinship is with power, subordination, authority, then definitely the concept of gender is having its relevance or connection to the process of kinship in this process. Thus, gender can be located within the matrix of kinship system. It would be interesting to note that how different kinship systems prescribe different roles and obligations to different genders, and this is the reason that gender roles are holding its significance in the kinship studies. Kinship can be visualized as an idiom through which various gender relations are negotiated. There are specific roles, gender roles, which are prescribed in societies in one way or the other, and these form the basis of kinship relationships. Means because of the performance of certain activities are done by mother-in-law or father-in-law, they are having their own kinship role. At the same time, the role which is performed by the female, that is focused by their gendered role. Thus, gendered role and kinship role both are holding their interrelatedness to one another in the life of an individual and for the sake of the study. Since different cultures have different kinship systems, the social relationships associated with kinship bond may also differ and thus in turn have different gender relationships. The common associated term with the kinship system and gender, because gender deals with the relationship between men and women, male and female. So, the term when it get associated to kinship, it reflects in the form of matriarchy and patriarchy. The debate between matriarchy versus patriarchy still continues as we come upon the matrilineal societies which are not necessarily based on matriarchy. Here it is important to understand that matriarchy means mother rights, whereas matrilineal societies are more based on lineage and inheritance pattern rather than on authority and power. Means when it comes to kinship, kinship deals with the power, kinship deals with the authority, and at the same time the term of inheritance of property, lineage is also associated with the terms and the conditions associated to the process of kinship. The constitution varies in relation to a patrilineal or a matrilineal society. With the passage of time, the focus is also shifted from the mere study of kinship relations to the study of kinship based on the changing pattern of relationships, because now again there is reimagining families, the families of live-in relationships, the families of lesbians and gays, the families of single parent. Here again a different protocol, a different pattern can be seen in the inheritance pattern and in the lineage pattern. Therefore, the changes or the transformation in the kinship scenario can also be seen. Thus, gender can be located in the kinship system, and kinship system hold its significance because of matriarchy or the patriarchal scenario. Now, if we talk about the gender in patrilineal and matrilineal societies, the reason is very clear, because patrilineal and matrilineal societies are established on the rules of lineage, descendants and inheritance. Means the term associated is lineage. When it is associated to father, it is patrilineal, and when it is associated to mother or female, it is matrilineal. But the term associated to both of them is lineage and inheritance. In patrilineal society, the rule of lineage, descent and inheritance follow the male line, that is, kinship is transferred or traced through the father, while in matrilineal society, kinship is traced through the mother. It is gender which provides a context for kinship ties and family law, and the inheritance of property through kinship ties are gendered. Therefore, as I said earlier, they both are associated to one another. This is one part of the entire picture, that is kinship through descent groups. The other part is how alliance or kinship through marriage began and gained importance. With a strict division of labor, a need to exchange food items came up. This probably led to a trade between male and female, and thus a new set of relationship between the two emerged. Before this time, the only interaction and relation between male and female was restricted to sexual intercourse and protection of females and children by male counterparts of the group. With the sexual division of labor, both male and female needed each other in an entirely new way for food and for trade of vegetable and meat, and this is the reason where this significance gained importance in the anthropological and sociological studies, because now the only reason is not biology, there are the reason of the economic factors or the fulfillment of the needs. This is the reason that the competition also raises between male and female, and thus a new scenario developed in the kinship study. There is the criticism of this evolutionary theory, and which was highlighted by Fox. Fox is criticized for laying too much emphasis on hunting. He focused, and in the light of the gathering hypothesis put forward by women scholar of human evolution, it is suggested that gathering was more important than hunting, as gathered food item in forms of vegetable and fruits formed more than 80% of hominid diet. Now, which was said by the evolutionary theorist that male holds significant position because it is male who perform the activity of hunting. For the process of hunting or for the activity of hunting, they have to move to the public domain. As a result, they remain outside the family. Woman is backed and women stay at home. They look after the family activities, they look after children, because of the process of the procreation, they have to stay back in the family and look after household domestic chores. As a result, they hold less important position and male hold significant important position. This was the question raised by the feminist, who said that it is not only hunting which was done by male, it is the process of gathering which was done by female for the continuity of the family, for the long running of the family members, and thus they recognize the importance of female and gender, female gender in the society. This challenges the very basis of Fox hypothesis. Another criticism is put forward by Hardy, who focused on the descent part of the kinship and its bearing on the gender relationships. According to him, the earlier form of promiscuous sex was advantageous to the female, as it was hard to ascertain the paternity of the offspring, and thus all the males who establish sexual relations with the females were considered to the father of the offspring. This arrangement was in favor of the females as it provided them and their children with protection from the males. However, as the society progressed, males devised ways to ascertain the paternity of the offspring through exclusion of women, etc., has led to the loss of autonomy of women. So, the evolutionary theory which highlighted the role of female and gender in the context of gathering and hunting was criticized by the scholars. Another theory which was in this context was given due importance by feminists, and feminist critique of kinship theory holds importance in the anthropological studies. At the base of kinship theories lay a dichotomy and a separation between domestic domain by female and the public domain by male. It is assumed that the domestic domain is largely marked by the mother-child bond, as women have to stay behind, look after the family, domestic courses and look after children. Therefore, the bond between the mother and child is very important, and the basic constitution of this domain is natural as compared to the public domain, which is constituted by politico-jurial facts. Again, it is assumed that the domestic domain is largely involved in fulfilling sexual and child-bearing roles, and the public domain is related with authority, power, legal rights, etc. Again, the demarcation or the dichotomy is very clear, where the role of male was associated with the power and authority, and the role of female was associated with the rearing of the child and the process of procreation. The domestic domain is therefore primarily associated with women, and the public domain is associated with men. The biological fact of sexual reproduction lies at the base of this assumption, and it is assumed here that the creation of human offspring is a result of heterosexual intercourse, pregnancy, and feminists criticizes kinship theory as they argue that assumption about gender lie at the core of kinship studies. Therefore, it is important to look critique of both the theories. Now, if we talk about the patrilocality and gender, then in a patrilineal kinship structure, a son remains a member of the family of orientation, whereas the daughter has to leave her natal house, the house in which she has taken birth, and move to the family of her affinal kins after marriage. She becomes a member of husband's family, and it is through these membership rules that society perpetuates itself within a definite structure. These kinship structures have special bearing on the perpetuation of patriarchal social relationships, and the rule of residence after marriage is an important reflection of the principles of kinship. Therefore, in patrilocal form of residence, a couple after marriage resides with the family of the groom, and this kind of residential arrangement is found in large parts of India. It is based on the basic premises that the daughter is not a permanent member of her natal house and she has to move out after marriage. This really has an important bearing on her productive and reproductive capacities and autonomy. It also influences the rules of inheritance and daughters' share in parental property. Therefore, the transformation of kinship pattern and gender relationships takes place. Matrilineal kinship pattern is considered to be more woman friendly as compared to the patrilineal pattern. However, in recent times it has been observed that the influence of the larger society, the more dominant pattern of patrilineal kinship is gaining ground, which has visible implications for gender relations and subjugations and subordination of women. The case in point here is that of Nayars of Kerala. matrilineality is found among the Nayars of Kerala. Kathleen Gough and other scholars like Fuller have provided a detailed anthropological account of how matrilineality is practiced and perpetuated among the Nayars. In this matrilineal organization, women were not dependent upon the husband as they are members of the matrilineal group known as Tarawad. A Tarwad consists of members belonging to the same matrilineal. The institution of marriage among the Nayars is characterized by Tali Ketu Kalyanam and Sambandh relationships. This is a ceremonial Tali trying ritual that marks the transition of a girl into a ceremonial marital relations with the male member of the engager. After this ceremony, the girl is permitted to have sexual unions and the other male members of the engager who are also considered as visiting husbands are allowed. Children born out of such sambandh unisons belong to the mother's Tarwad. Even the dissolution of Sambandham relationship was easy and was not looked down upon. Widowhood was not considered inauspicious and divorce and remarriage can easily take place without any social stigma attached to it. However, this kind of unique kinship and marriage pattern was located parallel to the socio-cultural matrix of high caste patrilineal Hindus and other religions also. Therefore, it is important to study any kinship pattern closely to that area particular where we are studying, and simultaneously the role of gender cannot be ignored in this context. If we talk about the present trends in studying kinship and gender, number of scholars are working on it, because in society at one point of reference number of features are acting simultaneously. Therefore, it is very important to know in detail, to discuss in detail, to talk in detail about the trends which are happening in the society, whether in the context of marriage, in the context of family, or in the context of kinship, because again the concept of gender is closely associated to all the processes. If we talk about the scholar's name as Snedd's work, he gave a new lease to life to the then dying study of kinship. As stated, he focused on the role of nature and biology in an anthropological analysis of kinship. Though his work left many questions unanswered, like the contradiction between different natures, yet it paved the way for later anthropologists to explore these avenues. Therefore, there are lot of changes taking place when we talk about the reimagining of families. At the same time, reimagining of kinship structure is also taking place. Stratton's After Nature is one such work which had been taken by Snedd's work forward. After Nature explores kinship relation coming to the new age of reproductive technologies. Therefore, in the changing scenario, when we talk about the various social processes which are taking place in the society, whether it deals with the globalization, industrialization, urbanization, modernization, lot of changes are taking places in the classical or the traditional wayouts of life, and so is the introduction of the new reproductive technologies. This work is based on the late 20th century English culture, the consumer and their choice of procreation using new technologies. Scholars argue that the new technologies have brought a new meaning, nature which was earlier taken for granted. Technological developments have opened up new avenues which were earlier not available to the consumer. Now, here it is important to keep in mind and to pay attention that earlier everything was not a part of a market. With the introduction of the process of globalization and with the passage of time, a number of forces which are working in the arena of relationships also, now everything has become a part of the market, and whenever, wherever there is market, there is the possibility of consumerism or a person become a consumer. So, in the context of relationships also, which were once upon a time used to consider to be very pious, respectful and known with a very dignified way, nowadays are seen in a very casual and a formal ways, and because of that their implications can be seen in the family, marriages and kinship. And so is the introduction of the new reproductive techniques, which again raised new questions, and therefore we talk about nowadays families we choose. Lesbian Gaze Kinship by Keith Weston is another work in the contemporary anthropology in gender and kinship studies. This work looks at the construction of identity in the domain of kinship, not based on blood or marriage, but by choice. Ties between gay men and lesbian, Weston works opened up a relatively unexplored avenue for social anthropologists to study the gay and lesbian relationships, where people create ties as family and friendship based on the idea of commitment. In this present era of live-in relationships, single parent and the kinship pattern that are coming up due to remarriage also falls within the scope of kinship and gender studies. The vocabulary of kinship terms has come under the scanner as it needs to introduce terms of reference for relatives as of second marriage and terms of address for new relations, thus created between children from ex-partners and partners of the and as parents of the new partner. Thus, it is important that like reimagining of families, it is important to hold or pay attention to the reimagining of kinship system also. Male and female no doubt holding their role or position in the society, but now in the present scenario when the acceptance was given to the LGBT community, it is important to give due attention to the relationships, to the kinship frames which are formed because of such importance. It is important here to notice again that life of an individual is important, but at the same time in the social scenario, the social relationships and their role and significance in the society cannot be ignored. Thus, in the present lecture, we talked about kinship and gender and their significance in the anthropological and sociological studies. Live-in relationships and other forms of new imagining families are also important in this context, because as their relationships form the basis of the kinship pattern in the society, thus the role of male and female along with the recognition to the new communities, it is important and discuss in detail sociologically the kinship pattern in the society. In this part of the program, we discussed in detail about the kinship and gender sociologically and anthropology. Not only we discussed about the traditional and the classical way out of studying this, but also in the realm of the contemporary scenario, we have tried to discuss in detail. We have discussed in detail about the families we choose as the work which established a standard for gay and lesbian ethnography, thus leading to a transforming intellectual impact on these gay and lesbian studies in the modern timings. And simultaneously, we have tried to discuss about the new reproductive technologies which are existing in the scenario, the relationships which are based earlier was only based on the biological relationships, but now because of the help of these techniques, a different scenario is also raising their heads and taking place in the society, and people are giving acceptance to them. So, here it is important to keep in mind that kinship is no doubt having a biological importance, but at the same time it is a social construct, and therefore, the role of gender in kinship always held a significant position. Thank you.